guitarist Marc Ferrari inside the album Keel, The Right to Rock. More info at fullandbloom.com. So what's new with you?
What's new with me? Well, Keel, very fortunately, and Cold Sweat, by the way, very fortunately, we're on the Monsters of Rock cruise number 10, which is probably the last cruise that sailed before this whole COVID thing happened. So I pulled double duty on the ship this year, actually triple duty, because I also did a Kiss tribute, the Cold Gin Band, which was the original Kiss tribute that Tommy Thayer became a part of after I left.
Right.
So that was fun to be on the ship, and with the Cold Sweat project, it was the first time that we played together in 29 years. I hadn't even seen two of the guys in 29 years, and we had one rehearsal, and we scraped off all the rust and the dust, and we killed it. We played the pre-cruise party on the Thursday night before the ship played at the Magic Casino, and then we played one more show on the boat. So that's kind of it as far as quote-unquote what's new. Now, we did record, the Cold Sweat did record our performances, and we are working on polishing them up just a little bit and trying to get them released in some form later this year, we hope. Not exactly sure how that's going to happen, but that's the other, that's the other kind of thing to report to you on the Cold Sweat front.
Very cool. Is it all the guys who did the record?
Oh, yeah. With Cold Sweat, it's the five original guys that were on that record.
Incredible.
And, it is incredible to think that we haven't even, we haven't even been in the same room in 29 years. So there's a fair amount of YouTube video out there that folks can go on and have a look at, and some of it's done in high def, and I'm real proud of the way the band came together, and kind of rose to the occasion. Keel, we're a little bit of a more well-oiled machine because we'll play once or twice a year. We've done the cruise. For us, it's almost like autopilot.
Is there any Keel news to talk about?
Not Keel the band. Ron Keel is pretty active out there. He just released an album of Southern rock covers, which he just sent me actually this week. I haven't had a chance to delve into it yet, but I come from that background too. A lot of folks might not know that I was in a Southern rock band in high school called Southbound, and we played a lot of the stuff, a lot of the artists that Ron is covering on that album. Allman Brothers and Skinner and Marshall Tucker and Blackfoot. 38 Special. I have some of those roots too. And so I'm looking forward to hearing Ron's project. But that's it as far as Keel goes. We don't have any recording plans, and obviously our playing plans are quote unquote on hold. So as we get through this whole COVID thing.
Cold Sweat, that got a re-release finally, correct?
That is correct. Came out actually 2019. It was re-released and remastered, which really kicked that into overdrive. I thought that album actually stood the test of time as it was. If you go back and listen to it now, yeah, sure, it's a little bit dated. I mean, it was, it was written and recorded, in the prime of the hair metal era, or towards the end of it, actually. But I still think the album stands up today, and the remastering really, really helped a lot. It's kind of like having a dirty windshield, and you clean the windshield, and you can, I can see again, or I see better. It's kind of like what it is with remastering. It just really brightens up the audio and brings it up to levels that are more in line with how records are mastered today. I think we sold out the first run.
So are they doing another run?
I believe they are.
Because that one used to fetch high dollar. Just getting a regular copy of that would fetch high dollar on eBay.
It's funny, I had a box of cassettes, original cassettes, unopened. I mean, I don't know who's got cassette players left, but, going through my storage, I found this box. I wound up sending them to all the guys in the band, but, those were, hadn't even been opened since like 1990. So, yeah, but so real proud of the way the Cold Sweat thing came together. I'm hoping it's not another 29 years before we play again, because we'd all be in wheelchairs and rockers by then. So that's all I can tell you on the Keel and Cold Sweat front. We are hoping, both bands are hoping to do more dates. As a matter of fact, Cold Sweat did have an offer to play another festival, and we were being submitted for other things when this whole thing hit. So hoping next year we can, pick it up where we left off.
Any thought of potential new music?
Well, New music would be, I don't know if it's new, but there were 4 or 5 demos that we recorded back in 1990 or 91. Some of them are floating around there, but we may either fix those up or maybe re-record them. In our case now, we've got 5 guys that live in 4 different states across the country, although with Pro Tools and stuff like that, it's easier these days to be able to record remotely, but I think that would be it as far as new material goes. Probably just polishing up those 4 or 5 demos that are out there.
Then you also have a children's book. I know you released that about 3 years ago, called Don't Dilly Dally Silly Sally. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. And by the way, just so your listeners, if they want to do a little more deep dive, if they head on over to marcferrari.com, all the stuff is up there. The book is up there. So I have a daughter who's now 17 years old and getting ready to go to college in the fall. But at a very early age, it became apparent that she was kind of marching to the beat of her own drum, and she was just really. It was really difficult to get her out the door on time for things. And we tried all the tricks in the book, like setting the clocks ahead or telling her we had to leave, 15 minutes earlier than we had to, that kind of thing. And she always struggled with time and time management. And, one day, just out of the blue, I don't know where this came from, I just blurted out, "Don't dilly-dally, silly Sally." I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? And at the time, I was working full-time for Universal. I think you may know that I sold my business to Universal.
Yeah, Master Source.
Yeah, Master Source. Didn't really have the time back then to devote to writing the treatment and everything, but after I semi-retired, I had some time on my hand, and I kind of circled back to it, and I developed the storyline. I submitted it to a bunch of publishers and got a lot of rejections, and I got one yes, so it's kind of like how it was with the other book, Rockstar 101. It just takes one publisher to say yes. And so, initially the book was written kind of as a love story to and about my daughter and for her, but I've heard from so many people that have similar challenges with kids that are not time-centric. And so the book is kind of just a gentle story on how kids can learn to manage time a little bit better, without any shaming or anything like that. And so, I didn't set out to be a children's book author. It just kind of happened. And if there's a sequel in there, I don't know. Maybe there is. But it certainly was an experience, going through that process of writing it, developing it, editing it, overseeing the illustrations, the publishing, and the marketing. It's a lot of work. I have a lot of respect for book authors because it's kind of like it's kind of like musical artists. It's a similar process. You got to go through the creative process, and you got to go through the marketing or the selling thereof of the product, and it's a lot of work on both ends. And on the website, there's 4 or 5 TV interviews that I did with various news channels here in Los Angeles when the book came out. It's kind of an interesting slant, a book written by a former major label recording artist, so kind of marketed it like from the stage to the page kind of thing. So again, your listeners can head on over to, or your viewers or your listeners can head on over to marcferrari.com and do a little more deep dive in there.
Regarding Master Source, was that kind of a slow process to decide to sell it, or was it just the money was too good, or how did that go down?
Well, by the time I made the decision to sell, which was back in late 2005, early 2006, a couple things came into play. First of all, I started seeing other competitors of mine being acquired by the majors, and my business had grown to the point where it was really taxing on me from an administrative point of view. I was just so much time spending on paperwork and data input and royalties and all that kind of stuff that's necessary, but it's boring and taxing, and it was taking away from my creative end of things. And I had become a father just a few years prior to that, and so everything together, I had a relationship with Universal prior to them wanting to acquire me. Incidentally, Keel was on MCA Universal, and one of the main guys there was involved with my publishing deal. So it's kind of interesting how that happened. But I just had, just kind of all the stars aligned at that point in time, and it just made sense for me to sell. I have no regrets selling. It freed up a lot of time for me to do other things. And then for the next 5 years, I actually ran the same business I sold to them as a Universal Music Group senior vice president. So there you go.
Incredible. It had gotten absolutely huge by that point too, right?
Yeah, well, it started out as my beer money, became my career money very quickly, because I was very early in on this whole music library thing. There were music libraries before MasterSource, but my company was the first music library that focused on songs, things that had a vocal in them. Back in the early 90s, nobody had a collection of material that sounded generically similar to the big pop artists of the day. So if you were a filmmaker or a TV producer and you wanted to license a song for your show, it required going out to both the publisher and the label, and it took a long time, and it was a lot of money. So my idea was, you know what? You're not going to afford that Van Halen song anyways, or that Garth Brooks song, or that Madonna song, but I can produce something for you that sounds generically similar to it. It's not ripping them off. It's just producing something that sounds in the ballpark of artist A, B, or C, and you know what? You can have that next week, and you can take a decimal point off the quote that the majors are giving you. So that was my idea. It took off like a frickin' rocket ship, and I was off to the races pretty quickly with that business.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you had quite a few of your buddies and ex-bandmates, and didn't they even have some music on there?
Oh, yeah. I worked with a lot of as you said, my buddies, guys like Tommy Thayer and Robin McCauley and Kip Winger's written a few. Paul Taylor from Winger's written a lot. Mark Slaughter's written a few. Phil Lewis has got stuff in there. A couple of the guys from King's X. And it's kind of a menagerie of guys that are great writers and added to the value of the track because of their notoriety. So yeah, I heard a lot of my buddies. Was happy to help them and happy to give them some work. Unfortunately, one of them just died. Bob Kulick just died a couple weeks ago, I guess it was. And Bob had a couple songs in the library with me, and he was a great producer, great writer.
Yeah. How did he pass?
I don't know.
Okay.
And there's been very, very little official word on it. I don't think Bruce has said anything, and I know some other people that were pretty close to him, including, some close friends, and they just, nobody's saying or nobody's knowing. So there's a lot of speculation as to what happened, but, I'm not gonna add to it. It's not my place to speculate on what happened.
Of
but
course.
I miss him. I respected him as a musician and as a person, and he was a friend to me. So,
is there anything else that you want to plug?
Well, actually not at the moment.
Okay.
I'm busy still in the library space. I have a new music library that I'm kind of the co-chair with here. It's called Soundbreakers, and it serves the sports programming community, and I'm busy with that. I'm still busy producing with MasterSource, and hopefully Keel and Cold Sweat will be able to resurface at some point in time in 2021.
Very cool. Now, to go along with this, is it cool if we go deep on The Right to Rock?
You can go deep on anything, man. Hit me up.
Okay, cool. How did you meet Ron Keel?
Well, that story's been told a few times, but I'll tell it again. It was through Mike Varney, and interesting story. When I was 18 years old, I submitted a demo to Mike Varney. He had that column in Guitar World magazine that featured, undiscovered guitar players, and a lot of great players have been featured in there. Guys like Yngwie and Billy Sheehan and Richie Kotzen and Paul Gilbert and I think Lou Saraceno. I'm probably missing a few. But anyways, I submitted a demo to Mike when I was 18 years old. And from that point in time, we became pen pals and then phone pals, but I never met him. And I moved out to Los Angeles in early '84, and I was shopping for a jacket that a leather jacket was stolen from me up at the Rainbow, and I'm shopping for a jacket down on Melrose, and I turn around and I see this guy, and it's Mike Varney. So I ran into him at this store, and I had moved out to Los Angeles to join three guys in my cover band in Boston. They moved out ahead of me. But those three guys left. They went back to Boston. I wasn't moving back. And so I told Mike, I had been out here for a while. Does he know anything going on? And he told me that Ron Keel was he was gonna kind of break up Steeler finally and form his own thing called Keel, and that's how we were introduced, was through Mike Varney, and that's how it happened, was through Mike. And once Keel got going, things happened pretty fast. Our first show was in April of '84. And by June of '84, we were recording Lay Down the Law, and then 2 months later, literally 2 months after we finished that record, we were in the studio with Gene Simmons. So I know you want to ask about that album, but we did not have a lot of time to prepare for that record. And as you may know, there's actually only 3 new songs on The Right to Rock, Keel songs. So we redid 3. There's a couple of Gene Simmons songs, and then there's the Stones cover that we did. So that's why we only had 3 new songs on The Right to Rock that weren't covers or redos, because we literally had to jump in the studio with Gene. Gene had a very short window to do that record, and it was take it or leave it, and so we decided to take it.
Lay Down the Law came out in November of '84, and then you released The Right to Rock in January of '85.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, we didn't have any control over those releases. I thought the Lay Down the Law came out a little bit earlier, maybe October, but if you're saying November, maybe it was, But yeah, the three new songs that are on The Right to Rock are the title track, Back to the City, and Electric Love. We redid Let's Spend the Night Together, Speed Demon, and You're the Victim, and then we had the 3 Gene Simmons songs. There's only 9 songs on that album.
I'm just curious, was there ever a discussion about, there were some great songs that I think even Ron Keel was the sole writer on the Steeler record. Was there ever a discussion to do a few of those Steeler songs?
Oh, I don't recall if that did come up in conversation. I'm sure it was nixed pretty early because, like everything else, we wanted to move forward. Like, why do a Steeler song when you've broken up Steeler? You've put the nail in that coffin and move forward.
Well, I would just think because still a lot of people hadn't heard of Steeler. They were kind of an obscure band, and since Keel was kind of going major label, part of great records is making that whole record
Steeler sold a boatload of records for a while. It was one of the best-selling independent rock albums. But I think, it's all about moving forward and not looking back.
Of course. When we did an interview like 15 years ago, really all that stuff's kind of an archive site now, but I'd still like to kind of get this along with the story. Can you tell me about the first time you met Ron Keel?
Yeah, I was renting an apartment. I believe it was on Clark Street or one of those streets over there by the Rainbow, and he picked me up in this Trans Am, and I thought, wow, look at this rock star. He's got his long hair and his shades. He's driving his sports car. He was living with his soon-to-be wife, Dee Dee, who was a beautiful woman. I said, hey man, this guy's got it all. So that was the start of our friendship and our working relationship that day. And I remember I actually went to the last Steeler show. The very last Steeler show was down in San Diego, and I think Kurt James was the last guitar player that he had. And
was Greg Chasen the bass player?
Yeah, Greg was the bass player, and Bobby Marks, who came along to be in Keel, was the drummer. Yeah, so Ron was showing me off as the new kid, kind of. That was a distinct memory too. Very, very early on, I met Ron. It must have been late February or early March of '84. But again, things happened pretty quick. Already had management. He already had a following in Los Angeles, and we were. Our first show was at Perkins Palace in Pasadena, over 1,500 kids. It was off to the races pretty quick.
Yeah, not a bad way to start. And then David Michael Phillips from King Cobra is in the band at that time, right?
Yeah, David was the first of the co-guitarists. The original Keel lineup, which only lasted one show, was me and Dave, Kenny Chason, Bobby Marks, and Ron. So actually, I'm the only one left out of that lineup that's still with Keel, because Kenny's not doing Keel anymore, and Dwayne Miller replaced Bobby in the summer of '84, and Brian J. replaced David. David, great player, nice guy. But I guess he was just kind of betting that Carmine Appice was going to have a quicker trajectory than us.
Well, I thought the initial kind of breakup is when Ron gets announced as the singer for Black Sabbath. Is that when he left, or was it a different time?
No, you're correct. After the first show, Ron announced that he had the gig. And I think the Sabbath guys came to the show, from what I remember. And but that came and went pretty quickly. But maybe that factored into Dave's decision. I actually auditioned for Lita Ford after Ron announced he was, he got the Sabbath gig. So we're all kind of scrambling to do other things. And I remember auditioning for Lita Ford. I wanted that gig so much because she was a huge star, and she was getting ready to go to Europe, and it was a salary and everything like that. But I think we were looking for somebody to play keyboards, and I was not that guy. But everything happens for a reason, and Ron came back to the roost, and we all came back and held it together. So we had a little scare there, I guess, but everything worked out okay.
So Brian J. comes in pretty quick after that?
Yeah, again, you're going back 36 years. Some of the dates are a little foggy with me, but I believe that would have been correct. That Brian, after Ron told us he didn't have the gig, we needed another guitar player. We wanted another guitar player, and that's when we found Brian.
So what leads up to you guys getting your deal? Now, is the deal with Gold Mountain, and then A&M is the distributor?
Exactly. The deal was with Gold Mountain. Was called a production deal. It wasn't a record deal. It was a production deal. And so we were playing all the clubs. We were selling out Country Club multiple nights, 2 nights at the Troubadour, did the Roxy. The Country Club was kind of our home away from home. I think we played there 4 times in the summer of '84, maybe 5. And it was just a process of, getting out there and trying to get labels down to see us, and Gold Mountain was the one that said yes at the time.
Do you remember anything about the day you signed your record deal?
There's probably a lot of drinking going on. Yeah, it's always an exciting day when you sign a record deal. It's the culmination of a lot of things, and the validation of your work ethic and your talent and your perseverance and all that kind of stuff. And it's this is what millions of people, millions of players dream of, and not everybody's able to obtain. Do
you recall what kind of deal you guys got?
I don't, but I could tell you it was probably a lousy deal. But look, I have no regret. I'm not, have no misgivings about any kind of deal that we signed. We were well represented. We had attorneys. We had good managers. Sure, they negotiated to the best of their ability. We weren't in a position, we weren't like already a multi-platinum band that could have a little more leverage. So, typically, I think in the state of California, there's laws saying you can't be bound to somebody for more than 7 years. So, there are some limits to you hear you get a 7-album deal at once. Yeah, if you can put out 7 albums in 7 years, good luck, But typically, back in those days, it was an album come out and then it was a year of touring. It was at least, it was about a year in between albums.
Do you recall what the budget was for that album?
Not much. Ron could tell you. It might have been $50,000, maybe $150. I don't know. It wasn't a lot by standards of the day, but we, I think we made a pretty solid record for the money that we had to work with.
How long did that album take to record?
Well, we did it in parts. I remember, because again, Gene was working, so there was sometimes we had to break for his filming schedule. It was pretty quick, as I mentioned, because he had to, I think he was leaving to go on tour, leaving to go on do another movie or something. So it was just a couple of months, start to finish. again, working pretty quickly, very efficiently.
Describe like a typical day in the life while you're recording the Right to Rock. Are you going in at the daytime and working all day, or did you work at night?
You know, I seem to remember not pulling a lot of all-nighters. Don't forget, Gene was there, for the whole thing. So, and he wasn't a burn the candle, 24 hours a day kind of guy. He was definitely a business guy. So I seem to recall that, we got going around noon and would work till like 10, 11 o'clock or midnight. I don't recall coming out of the studio, it was daylight in the morning, So that's my recollection. And again, we are rolling the clock back here, 36 years now. But my recollection is that we worked semi-normal hours, for musicians, starting around noon and just getting out of there 11, 12 o'clock. They were long days. They were productive days. You hear stories about bands that get in the studio and spend a week getting a drum, a snare sound or whatever. We didn't have that liberty. We had to make every hour in that studio count. So we were pretty efficient. We were definitely well rehearsed going in there. And don't forget some of those songs. 3 of them were on the Law album, and the 3 new songs that we wrote for that album, and the 3 Gene songs, we had rehearsed them pretty relentlessly going into the studio.
Just how Gene is, I'm sure the setting and the environment was pretty clean. You guys stayed sober throughout the sessions?
Maybe not entirely sober, but not rip-roaring drunk where we couldn't, look, it was the 80s. But, look, I always my philosophy was I wanted me to shine through. I didn't want Jim Beam to shine through or Corona the beer, not Corona the virus. So I always recorded, I was never drunk or high when I recorded. I wanted to be sharp. To each their own. There's some artists out there that obviously perform at a high level when they have a certain amount of intoxicants in their body. But I can't, it's not my position to pontificate on, what's right or wrong for anybody else. It's just what's right and wrong for me. So we were all, and Ron is a very straight shooter too. He's very focused, laser-like focus. He was kind of like the drill sergeant of the band. So, and again, we didn't have the liberty of taking a day off because somebody had a hangover. Or couldn't find the time to wake up and get to the studio on time.
You recorded the Right to Rock at the record plant?
Yeah, record plant. We might have done some overdubs at Baby O. Again, I'm going back 36 years. We did some recording at Baby O also.
What do you remember about the record plant? Anything kind of stand out?
I remember they had a hot tub there. I also remember I have a picture with Barbara Streisand. She was recording when we were there, and I remember sending that picture to my folks, and they couldn't believe I was hanging out with Barbara Streisand. I remember just friends dropping by, other our friends in Black and Blue and stuff would drop by. But I do remember the hot tub. we had some good times in the hot tub.
Care to share a story?
Depending upon what the rating of your show is.
Just like chicks in the hot tub bringing girls out and stuff like that?
Yeah.
How often do you play guitar nowadays?
Well, I try to play every day, and I alternate between, since I don't have a rock show coming up now, I play a lot of classical guitar. So I like to keep, just kind of like to keep the fingers moving and keep the muscle memory going. So I try to play a little bit every day. There are patches, I go through patches where I don't play guitar sometimes, and there was a while where I didn't play electric because I just didn't have anything coming up. But, when we had the Cold Sweat and Keel gigs, I kind of put the classical guitar down and concentrated on relearning my parts, and again with the Cold Sweat stuff, we hadn't played those songs in 29 years, so there was a little bit of relearning to do.
So you're a finger picker?
I'm a finger picker. I love classical guitar. I actually studied it. I took lessons. I actually took a course in classical guitar at LA Valley College back in the 90s, I think it was, and then I actually studied with my teacher for a while. That's a devotion, I can tell you that. Playing classical guitar is a devotion and really requires a lot of technical ability that not a lot of rock guys may develop. Because it's just you and the guitar. You can't hide behind a Marshall amp or a fuzz box or a distortion, or a wah-wah pedal or a whammy bar. It's just 5 fingers, 10 fingers actually, and 6 strings, 5 on each hand. That's all you got.
Describe a typical day nowadays. What does your day look like?
Well, as mentioned, I am extremely busy. I'm running 2 music libraries. I still produce music for a library that I sold to Universal back in 2007. And I'm also involved with a new production music library called Soundbreakers, which is administered by Universal and has an affiliation with Endeavor, which is the big talent agency. So our Soundbreakers library is producing music primarily for sports programming that Endeavor controls. Endeavor bought the largest sports agency in the world several years ago called IMG. And so IMG produces or distributes almost 30,000 hours of programming every year. It's just a ton of, this is on a global basis, not just here in the U.S. So we are developing a music library for use for the IMG/Endeavor programming. And we're producing an album a week, which is just insane. It's just an insane amount of work. As far as, my involvement is mostly on the data end of things and, updating websites and making sure audio files are correct and data is correct and issuing contracts. And it's a ton of work. So between that and the stuff I'm still doing for MasterSource, and I'm also involved with putting deals together for Sound Exchange and publishing on behalf of a company in New York. And I'm music supervising about 15 films a year. My plate is fuller than ever.
Unbelievable.
I don't know if I mentioned that I've been music supervising films for a company called Hybrid, which produce anywhere from 8 to 15 movies a year. A lot of them are holiday movies that if you're watching Hallmark or Lifetime during the holiday season, all those wonderful holiday movies that they broadcast. I'll be the supervisor on 6 or 8 of them a year, and then another 6 or 8 dramas throughout the course of the year. So with all of that on my plate and being the father to a child that's going off to just graduated high school and getting ready to go to college, I don't have any downtime. So I like being busy. For a while I was semi-retired and I got bored really quick. These things keep me just keep me busy and keep my mind on things. So
right.
I enjoy it, but sometimes it's a bit overwhelming.
And are you writing music as well for like the library music? Are you actually creating some of the songs?
Yeah. So I'm, these days I have more time now to co-write with my friends. So I am writing music for the various libraries that I just mentioned. And again, with everything on my plate, it's just collectively, it keeps me pretty damn busy.
And so what, do you have like a Pro Tools setup or something at the house?
Yeah, Pro Tools. I use Pro Tools and Adobe Audition, Vegas, a little bit of everything.
Back to the Right to Rock, are there any standout moments when you reflect on those sessions nowadays?
Well, I remember Eddie Van Halen came down to one of our sessions. That was certainly a day, and that started a friendship that continues to this day. I distinctly remember when he came down to the studio because I was recording at the time. And I think I may have
told the story. No pressure there, right? Yeah,
no pressure there. But he made me feel right at home. And I don't know if I continued the session until after he left, but it was a little intimidating meeting him for the first time, of course. I think any guitar player would be intimidated meeting him. But he's a super sweet guy. He's really a nice, a nice guy, super sweet guy, very unassuming. And as I mentioned, we continue a friendship today. We're both car guys, and we've driven together a couple times.
Did you ever buy a Ferrari?
I'm on my second one.
Are you really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Which ones did you buy?
My first one was a 430 Scuderia, which is the track-focused version of the 430. For the last 5 or 6 models, Ferrari has done a version that's focused for the track, where they would take the car and they would modify it so it would be track ready. And that typically means taking anything out of the car that has weight that doesn't need to be there. In the Scuderia's case, there's no carpeting, there's no insulation in there, no radio. It has different engine mapping, a different exhaust system. It sits lower. There's more torque. There's more horsepower. It's really quite different than the standard 430. That's a very loud, angry, aggressive, growly car. So I had that one for 6 years. I drove it. I bought it with 1,000 miles. I sold it with 23. I drove it every week. At least try to fire it up and take it down the freeway a little bit, but I wasn't afraid to put the miles on. When I bought that car, it had 1,000 miles after 4 years. So obviously nobody drove that car. And now I have a 458, which is the model that replaced the 430 with the 458 Italia. That's what I'm driving now.
Very nice. What year is that?
That one's a 2012. Bought it with semi-low miles on it. I bought it in 2018. It was 6 years old. I had 9,000 miles on it. So that one was driven obviously a little bit more, but pretty gently, averaging 1,500 miles a year. But I put on about 5,000 miles a year on my cars. So, again, I'm not afraid to drive them. They were built to be driven.
Yeah, you kind of have to drive them to keep them in shape, don't you?
Absolutely. If you don't drive them, then you got, stuff, seals wear out, and you start getting issues, start getting issues with the cars when it's not used. So shouldn't be afraid of a high mileage car as long as it's been maintained properly.
Eddie Van Halen, I'm assuming he came in because of the Gene Simmons connection. Is that why he came down to the studio?
Yeah. He was friends with Gene. I think a lot of folks probably know the story with Gene producing some of the early Van Halen demos and shopping them around. So yeah, they had a close friendship, and that's absolutely how Eddie Van Halen wound up at our session.
Anything else to that story? Anything you remember talking about or anything like that?
No, I think we probably just chit-chatted. Again, probably just general stuff. Back then, I don't remember specifically our conversation, but that happened in late 84, I guess it was. And then in 86, we actually wound up opening for Van Halen at the Texas Jam. We were the first. We like to say we headlined the show. We let Van Halen close, but it wasn't quite like that. We were the second band on the bill that day, and I'm sure that Ed had something to do with that. Or at least lobbied for us, or Gene may have called Ed and, hey, make sure these guys are on the bill, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I was at that show. Was that with Dio and Crocus, and were they also on that bill, or? Yeah,
BTO, Loverboy, Crocus, Dio, and Van Halen. I believe was the lineup back there.
Yeah, I was there. Now, at the beginning of the recording, drummer Bobby Marks left the band. Why did he leave?
Well, he didn't leave in the beginning of the recording. He actually recorded On the Right to Rock and was replaced after. So
oh, wow.
I'm pretty sure the credits reflect that Bobby played on there, and there was additional percussion by Dwayne Miller. Let's see if I can find my Right to Rock.
Yeah, I thought Steve Riley was credited as the drummer.
Yes, that is correct. I got all my drummers mixed up here. Yeah, Steven played. You're absolutely correct. Steven played the drums on the Right to Rock. Bobby was so funny. We had 3 different drummers on 3 different albums, right? We had Bobby Marks on Lay Down the Law. We had Stephen Riley, who did the bulk of the recording on the Right to Rock, and then the Final Frontier and Keel were Dwayne. Yeah, I'm looking at the. It says additional drums and vocals by Stephen Riley and Dwayne Miller drums and vocals. But my recollection is that it was Stephen's tracks. They should have been reversed actually. But Dwayne was a member of the band by the time we shot the album cover for that.
But was it Bobby's decision to leave the band, or was he fired?
I don't think so. I think it was Ron's decision. Ron and Bobby had a long history together, dating back to Steeler. I think that Ron felt that Bobby wasn't ready to make the move up to the majors with us. He was great as a AAA player, but wasn't ready to make the move up to the majors. But Bobby was like my best friend in the band, and so he was the guy I was closest to friend-wise, and I didn't have a car for a while, so he was my taxi, So. But, you'd have to ask Ron what his thinking was back then.
When we did an interview years ago, you had said that you hadn't really heard anything. Have you heard anything from him nowadays?
From Bobby?
Yeah.
I actually saw him about 4 or 5 years ago because he's living up in Santa Barbara now, and I went up. I spent the weekend up there beach camping with my daughter, my wife, and he came down to have lunch with me. I don't know if he's playing anymore, and but he's on Facebook, so once in a while he pops up in my feed.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think he, after Keel, I don't really think he did much of anything in the music space.
Barry Brandt from Angel actually comes in first, right?
Yeah, Barry, I think he was hired. I remember rehearsing with him, but then he started taking some time off. We were in the middle of production here for the Right to Rock album, and again, we just had this narrow window to do this album. And I just remembered he wouldn't come to rehearsal. He had to do something this day, and next day he had to do something else. And it just became apparent that this was not his main focus. And again, he was in a semi-big band that had 4 records out already and a fair amount of touring, and he already was a rock star. And here he was in this band that hadn't even recorded its first major label album yet. So. That was not a good fit. So, and then did the record with Steven. Now, I don't know. The funny thing is, I don't know why Dwayne wasn't considered. Right off the bat. Why did we get Dwayne in when we let Bobby go? Why do we hire Steven? Dwayne maybe wasn't on the radar yet. I'm not sure. That would be a Ron question.
Fred Coury from Cinderella was there for a brief moment as well.
Fred was in there too. Fred was in there really early because Fred stayed with me. And Fred and I continue a friendship today. But I think Fred wasn't quite used to Ron's, again, Ron was kind of like a drill sergeant back in the day, that's not saying anything negative. It was just the way he was. He was very focused and very serious. Ron was very, very serious. And I think that style kind of rubbed Fred the wrong way. So he didn't last that long with our band, maybe a couple of weeks. And
then after the recording, or at least when the drums are done, Steve Riley leaves to join Wasp. Are there any... That's correct. Yeah, we played a couple of shows with Steve. There's actually some photos out there. I remember Burn Magazine came out. I think we played played out in San Bernardino, Civic Center out there, or... somewhere out there. I know Burn came out there. So there was, we played a couple of shows with Steve. But yeah, that's when he, I guess he was kind of just rolling the dice that, Wasp was already signed to Capitol, and they may have already had a record out in late 85. I'm not sure, but that was his decision to jump ship. Yeah, actually, I think he joined he did the tour for the first Wasp record. The Riley shows would have been in the summer of 84. Don't forget, our album wasn't even scheduled to come out till January of 85, and none of us were making any money back then. There was just no money, so I'm sure that kind of factored into his decision. Are there any Steve Riley moments that stand out? Oh, he was a funny guy. He was my bud in the band. He was from Boston. He had he's just a very gregarious, outgoing guy with a wonderful sense of humor. I really took to him a lot. So, we didn't have a lot of time together. Just a matter of
a matter of months, really, from we started recording The Right to Rock, I believe, in, I'm going to guess it was August of 84, and I can't recall if those shows were before or after the gig, after the recording, but we didn't have a lot of time with him. I'm guessing maybe 3 months, 3 to 4 months in and out, Stephen. But I love the guy. He was great.
You guys have Mike Davis engineer the record, who also did Lay Down the Law?
That is correct. Mikey was Ron's guy, and so he came, yes, he was credited as, I believe, he's credited as assistant engineer or on the record. But yeah, Mikey was Ron's pal, and kind of came along with the ride. Recorded and mixed by Mikey Davis. That's what the credit on the album says.
How was it working with him?
Great. I mean, don't forget this. I'm 22 years old. These are the first really professional recordings I've done. Lay Down the Law was self-produced. This is the first album, The Right to Rock, for a major label, And, I remember Mikey being a really nice guy and musical, too. He wouldn't be afraid to, offer an opinion as to a performance or, if something wasn't in tune or whatever. So I just remember all good things working with him, and never any conflicts or egos or anything like that. It was all good.
Of course, I know he's doing the tracking, but is Gene kind of over his head saying, hey, let's do this? And
Yeah. And I remember Gene being very helpful with suggestions, with, hey, why don't you try this, Well, I'll give you an example. Let's spend the night together. On the Right to Rock version, the guitar solo, if you listen to the guitar solo, it backwards tape on there. The old trick where you took the tape and you physically put it backwards, so you get this reverse effect. Sure. Now you can do it electronically. But that was Gene's idea. It was different than the original, on the Lay Down the Law version, the solo was different. I'm just giving you an example of ideas that he would throw out. Gene was very, very helpful with production ideas, and also just kind of keeping the peace, being a referee. Not that there was a lot of disagreement, but one of the roles of the producer is to ensure that the tone of the session is civil. Kind of like a judge keeping order in his courtroom, right? It's kind of like the same thing.
How does he come into the picture? How does he end up producing the record?
How does Gene?
Yeah.
You're talking about Gene? Well, Gene had a relationship with our label owner, Danny Goldberg, and that's how that came to play. I believe Danny comes from the publicist end of things, and was Led Zeppelin's publicist initially, and then ran Swan songs. But I believe that relationship, Danny and Gene, goes back to New York. Back to the mid '70s or late '70s. So that's how Gene comes into the picture. It was through Danny Goldberg.
Okay. And so I'm assuming it's still a band decision to say, okay, and of course, being Gene Simmons, I'm sure that was kind of cool too. But as far as, is it still a band decision, or is it like Danny says, this is who's producing?
I don't think, band meaning Ron back then. Look, I'm sure, again, you're rolling back here over a third of a century ago.
Right.
But again, because we had such a, maybe the Gold Mountain deal hinged on us doing this record with Gene during that period of time. It may have been that. But all of us wanted to work with Gene. He wasn't forced on us. I want to make that clear. He was not forced on us. He seemed to be a natural choice. Here's a musician. Here's a guy who's extremely powerful. Here's a guy that can pull strings. Here's a guy that can be your flag waver. The benefit of working with Gene, had a lot more things in the plus column than just him being the producer of the record. Let's put it that way. We got a lot of mileage out of being produced by Gene Simmons. Do
you recall anything about meeting him for the first time?
Oh, yeah. I distinctly remember meeting him for the first time because we were rehearsing in this sweat box in South Central. we called it the Steeler Mansion, but it was anything but. It was just a couple of rooms. A couple of guys were living there, and it was very hot in there, and very claustrophobic, and cockroach infested. But I distinctly remember he came down in his Rolls Royce, and that's where we were rehearsing at the time. I think right after that first rehearsal, he got us out of there, and we went to SIR because it was not in a safe neighborhood. We had experiences with batteries getting stolen out of our cars, and just interactions with some folks down there that weren't pleasant. But it was certainly intimidating, meeting him the first time. Gene can be funny. He's definitely got this serious side to him, but he can be goofy too.
Oh, yeah, that came through in his show, which I believe you had said you supplied some of the music for, right?
Some of the music on the early seasons, yes. Yeah. That's correct.
How does he compare to, say, other producers you worked with?
Well, look, I've worked with three, Gene, Michael Wagner, Kevin Beamish. They all have their own styles and everything. Of the three, Michael Wagner was the most technical. He was definitely up on technology, and our Keel album actually was our first album that was recorded digitally. Kevin Beamish certainly had a great musical sense. He was, of the three, the most involved in arranging our songs. That was the Cold Sweat project. But we also worked with Kevin on the single for Rock and Roll Outlaw, too. Gene, being the musician of the three of them, I think was easier to communicate musical things. And he was certainly great being, of the three producers, certainly the one that, went over and beyond in trying to help further our career. That was, as I mentioned, getting to work with Gene had a lot of benefits that, a regular non-rock star producer could do. But again, all three of them were great at what they did, and I think their work speaks for themselves.
Are there any Gene stories that stand out from the Right to Rock sessions?
Well, I'll give you one more personal story. I remember he wanted to take a break and go out for frozen yogurt, and I never knew what frozen yogurt was, but that was his little. That was one of his little weaknesses. He had a sweet tooth. So I remember distinctly getting in that big frickin' Rolls Royce of his and going out to a yogurt, place to get frozen yogurt with him. It was like, it was just one of those surreal moments. I'd never been in a Rolls Royce before, so that was a story that sticks with me.
How do you guys record your guitars? Did you and Brian each lay down your rhythm guitars?
Yes. Yeah, we may have, and again, we're rolling back a long time here, Adam, so my recollections may not be as clear as they were, but I remember, I think we used to do a band take, we used to do a band take. The drums we'd do the drums, you have to do the drums first, but you have to play, the drummer has to play along with something. So I seem to remember that we recorded guitar and drums, and then we would go back and re-record the guitars. It's kind of like building a house. You got to start with the foundation. In this case, the foundation being the drums. And then Brian and I would individually go back and track rhythm guitars, and then solos, and then vocals were typically the last thing to go on.
Did you use the same guitar while recording, or did you switch it up?
I used my 1968 Gibson Les Paul for most of those tracks. It's been with me since high school and was the bedrock of most of my recording. I had in 84, which was when we did the Right to Rock, I also would have had I had a custom built Strat that I built in Boston that would have also been with me. And, sometimes, I would use Ron's guitar or even Brian's guitar, if they felt a guitar sounded better for a certain track than another guitar. But in general, it was my 68 Les Paul on most of those recordings.
So you also are listed as a co-writer on the title track. How did the Right to Rock come about?
Well, I thought I addressed this in our first interview, but the Right to Rock, the track, came about as a warm-up song on the Lay Down the Law sessions. We were just getting tones back then, on one of the songs, and Ron and Mikey just asked me to play something, play something. Let's hear what you got. And that's how that happened. It just came out of me. That's what I started playing. It came off the cuff, off the top of my head. And the other guys jumped in, and Ron said, "Hey, what's that?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, record it." And we did. Fortunately, we saved that from the Lay Down the Law session, and that morphed into the Right to Rock. That's how that happened.
Was there a reason why you weren't writing more on that record?
Again, I come back to this whole thing about the Right to Rock is that we had so little time to do it. You have to understand, we had finished recording Lay Down the Law literally 2 months before we started the Right to Rock, okay? And so, I don't think I was writing in that 2 month period. When none of us really knew we were going to be jumping back into the studio so quick, right? So we had the Right to Rock, we had Electric Love, and Back to the City were both Ron's tracks. And then in order to just get this record done with Gene in this short period of time we had with him, we decided to re-record 3 songs and then use 3 of Gene's, But as you know, on the Final Frontier album, I had a lot of songs, because that was a longer cycle. We had a 1-year period in between recording The Right to Rock and the Final Frontier. And on the road, I was writing. We knew we were doing another record, and so that's where that happened.
How many copies sold of that album?
Well, I believe it was close to gold. I think Ron will confer. We were probably about 400,000 units. And over time, I believe it probably did get over 500,000, but we never got gold records. But I'm thinking it was between 300,000 and 400,000 units.